Hey guys, in this video I'll be assembling the Titan lat pull down with a 300-pound weight stack. I hope this video helps you assemble your own in some way, and I also hope that you learn from my mistakes that I'm going to end up making in the video. I'll start out by saying that it's definitely doable if you are the only person assembling it, but it would be a lot easier to do if someone is helping you out. So everything came in a huge wooden crate via freight, and I first hauled every box and every piece down into my basement and remove all the packaging and just organize everything on the floor. Over here I laid out all the hardware and all the smaller pieces that came in bags. And then over here I laid out all the little 10-pound weight plates that'll go on the weight stack, really close to where I'll actually assemble it so I don't have to waste a bunch of time carrying them to and from. Lastly, I laid out a horizontal mat on the ground where I'll put the lat pull down on top of. So the most important part in my opinion is to lay out all of the nuts, bolts, and washers together into each of their own little group. Some of the bolts are just like 5mm different in length than one another, so it'd be really easy to use the wrong part. You will need a 19 and 17mm socket because Titan uses the metric system. So I first laid out the rear cross base on the floor and then bolted the rear upright to it, which is the upright without the slot in the bottom like you see on the screen right now. Then I took the bottom cross base and bolted it to the rear upright. And then added the front upright, which is the one with the slot at the bottom. And then finally added the seat support frame and ensuring it's the right orientation like you see there. And at this point we have something that kind of starts to look like a lat pull down. So then you'll bolt one of the guide rod plates to the bottom cross member. Then you'll put these two metal rods into the holes horizontally, and this is actually what will support the guide rods when they go through the holes on the little top plate there. You'll then screw these two M10 bolts into the bottom of the cross member, and I think that these are just for support. I'm not really sure because you'll see here mine actually stick out like halfway, so not exactly sure what those are for, but the instructions say to put those in. So next we'll be installing the guide rods with all the weight plates for the weight stack on it. So because I was working alone, I needed something to hold up the guide rods while I was putting the plates. So what I found that worked really well was putting up a band or two around the top upright that'll end up holding up the guide rod when I'm putting in the plates. I would make sure it's pretty tight on there and doesn't give very much. You'll place the two guide rods into the holes on the plate, as well as putting those two rubber bushing things at the bottom. And then you'll begin sliding the weight plates onto the guide rods. And you'll see that the band at the top is supporting the guide rods as it's trying to fall over a little bit, but luckily it's not. So yeah, this would be a great step to have someone help you out and hold the rods up while you're sliding the plates down, but again, if you have a band lying around, you can really do this just fine. So as I was putting on the last few weight plates, I noticed that the band was flexing a little more than I thought it would, and just in case, I wrapped another band around the two uprights to tighten it up a little bit, and it ended up being absolutely fine after that. Better be safe than sorry. So next we'll combine the top weight plate, this little pin, and then the selector rod together. At first glance I thought it would just slide right in, but it turns out you have to hammer the hell out of it to get it to go in. I first tapped it in a little bit without the selector rod being in there just to have it be flush. And then after that I put the selector rod in and hammered it all together. And at this step you really want to make sure you don't forget to put the selector rod in, because if that pin goes through without the selector rod, that pin is really not coming out. I would highly recommend flipping the weight plate over and hammering this in from behind, because you'll see at the end there, I kind of damaged the face of the plate a little bit with the hammer, but it's fine because it's completely cosmetic. You'll see it really took a lot of force to get this thing in there, and your mileage may vary, but just want to make it known that that thing like seriously took a lot of force to get in. So then you'll slide that entire part into the guide rods at the top and then place it on top of the rest of the weight stack. And then you'll screw in these 4 threaded rods at the top of each side of the top plate, as well as with these little metal rings that I think just hold up bands if you want to put those on. It kind of looks just cosmetic to me. So next I had to remove these bands at the top because I had to put the cross member on. So to still hold up the guide rod without anyone helping me, I put some bungee cords around. That ended up holding up the guide rods perfectly fine. And yeah, this is going to be another good step for you to have someone help you out. But I thought this was a really good way to keep them upright. I then bolted the next guide rod plate to the top cross member and then added it to the top of the machine, ensuring you put the guide rod on the holes on the plate up top. At this part, I had to hit it with a mallet a little bit because it was a really tight fit, just to make sure that the piece was completely vertical. And then here's where the bungee cords came in handy, where they were just really easily removed after they did their job. So next we'll put up these two plates up top where the pulleys will be held. A really important note here is that this is the correct way to assemble it, noting that in the middle there's less space and then it kind of tapers out as you get to the front of the machine. The first time I assembled it, I end up doing it backwards, and you'll see there's more space in the top and it narrows towards the front. This is the clip where I put them on backwards, but it's the same principles and motions, and I didn't really record the other part when I put it back on. It was a little hard to do by myself, holding up the plates and then also reaching down to get the bolts, but you'll see I ended up doing it just fine. And then I just screwed in the 4 pulleys to the plate up top. Worth noting, at the top there's a little bushing. I would not install that thing until you put the pulley cable in. So next we'll assemble the seat portion of the machine by first attaching a plate to each side, like so. And then combine the foot plate with this little tube here, ensuring that the holes are face up. And this piece slides in and out really nicely with this pin here. And then slide in the vertical tube with the pin. And then attach the leg rollers to each side. And then screw in the little end caps. And then you'll put on these 2 little L brackets, which I think just reinforce the unit for structural integrity. I actually found that these plates were bent a little bit on both sides once I tightened down all the bolts. And what I think is happening here is that the weld on each side of this piece on the left is a little too thick. But it shouldn't be the biggest deal in the world because I don't think this plate is doing much anyway. But I just wanted to call that out. So this is actually about a month later now. Titan didn't include the pulleys in the package initially, so after a lot of calls and emails, they finally sent me one that I can get this thing fully assembled. So I first fed the bottom pulley through, and this is where I realized I probably messed up a bit again. You see me trying to feed this pulley into the bottom, and I look at the camera all confused and try to fit it in again. What I did was I lifted up the machine from the right side there, you can't really see me. And then my girlfriend put the pulley in from below. It definitely would have been easier if I just put it under there while I was building the frame, but this worked out fine. I fed the pulley around it and then bolted it into place. Next I fed the top pulley through to get a rough estimate of what it'll look like and how closely the 2 pulleys will line up. So I took the 2 pulleys and put them on the little round plate. I fed the wire through each side and then bolted it all together. Then I tightened the end screw of the pulley cable in just a little bit to the top of the weight stack. Don't do it all the way yet. For the bottom pulley, I had to put a little bit of tension on it to install the remaining 2 pulleys at the bottom, which went in with relative ease. Put in these remaining 2 bolts that don't really do anything. It was at this point I realized the wire at the bottom was not actually on the pulley. So I just took a screwdriver and fed it on correctly and everything was just fine. So I actually made another mistake here. I tightened both end screws as tight as I could, which caused the top plate to not sit flush with the rest of the stack. So I loosened up both of them and then screwed them in again at the same time, like at the same rate. Just making sure that the top and bottom screws were inside of the threads the same amount. So this is what my screws look like. They stick out about this much, and asking people online, it looks that this is actually pretty normal. And from using it, they haven't been stripped yet, so hopefully it's going to be fine. So overall, assembly wasn't terrible. Mainly, I'm just happy I can finally use it. This was the first mishap I've had with Titan, so I can't really speak bad about them, but I really, really love this piece. So thank you for watching, and feel free to drop any other questions in the comments below, and I hope that this helped you in some way.